I'm on temporary duty supporting Task Force Barrier at the Tucson Resident Office and observing construction activities at Tucson 1, 2, and 3 at Lukesville, Arizona. The Tucson Sector 1, 2, and 3 project at Lukesville consists of installation and replacement of 63 miles of pedestrian fencing and supporting infrastructure to include a patrol road, lighting, and CCTV efforts. At this stage, we're observing pre-construction activities, including survey to determine that soil conditions will meet the construction needs. Today, we observed the efforts of a 6-person team consisting of a geologist, 2 drilling technicians, and 3 support personnel, equipment operators, and quality control oversight. Together, the team performs site boring surveys at 6 locations covering 6,000 feet along this fence line. The drilling process consisted of setting up the equipment with the 2 drilling technicians, taking samples at 3, 6, and 9 feet of depth, and at each depth location pulling a sample for the geologist to examine and review. These samples, or called spoons, consisted of 18 inches of material that were examined to determine the quantity or the composition of the soils to determine what construction methods it can support. Well, the purpose of the soil excavations is simply to determine what the soil consists of. They were pleased that at all test locations today and that the 5 locations conducted yesterday, the soil samples were representative of what the engineers had hoped to find. But it's really about determining what the soil composition is. The construction team is happy to be at work and is following safety procedures. They answered USACE questions about the processes they were following and ensured that everybody maintained a safe distance from the equipment. We're off to a good start.
Before the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers can start replacing barriers along the southern border for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, a lot of groundwork has to be completed. One of the first steps for Task Force Barrier is to test the soil to see what type of construction methods it can support. Task Force Barrier is operating under Section 284 of Title 10, U.S. Code, which gives the Department of Defense to construct roads and fences and to install lighting to block drug smuggling corridors across international boundaries of the United States in support of counter-narcotics activities of federal law enforcement agencies. USACE is overseeing 310 U.S.C. Section 284 funded contracts for border barrier work in El Centro, California, Yuma, and Tucson, Arizona, and El Paso, Texas. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Task Force Barrier installed the first replacement barriers along the southwest U.S.-Mexico border were installed August 22, just west of Calexico, California. This is done in response to the President's February 15 National Emergency Declaration on the United States southern border. DoD has the authority under Section 284 of Title 10, U.S. Code, to construct roads and fences and to install lighting to block drug smuggling corridors across international boundaries of the United States in support of counter-narcotics activities of federal law enforcement agencies. USACE's execution of these projects is in support of an ongoing partnership with Custo MS and Border Protection and U.S. Border Patrol since 2004. The engineers under the Task Force Barrier Contractors constructed and installed barrier panels at the El Paso project site near Santa Teresa, New Mexico, throughout September 2019. The barrier system project spans approximately 46 miles. Also, barrier construction continues along the southern border of the United States, near the border town of Lukeville, Arizona, September 19, 2019. As one team erects barrier panels, another team begins work relocating cacti that lies within the bounds of the barrier team's path. Some Americans have been advocating doing more for the border, like putting in wide and long trenches. This idea is actually not far from the truth, according to an article from the New York Times and other outlets. President Trump in private conversations have brought up the idea of fortifying a border wall with a water-filled trench, stocked with snakes or alligators, prompting aides to seek a cost estimate. Also, he wanted the wall electrified, with spikes on top that could pierce human flesh. After publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot migrants if they threw rocks, the president backed off when his staff told him that was illegal. But later in a meeting, aides recalled, he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. That's not allowed either, they told him. According to the article, Mr. Trump had routinely berated Ms. Nielsen, who was the head of Homeland Security, as ineffective and, worse, at least in his mind, not tough-looking enough. Lou Dobbs hates you, and Coulter hates you, you're making me look bad, Mr. Trump would tell her, referring to the Fox Business Network host and the conservative commentator. It was also reported in the article President Trump met up with Ms. Nielsen and worked a room filled with Border Patrol agents. Start turning away migrants at the border, he told them. My message to you is, keep them all out, the president said. Every single one of them. The country is full. After the president left the room, Mr. MC Alinan told the agents to ignore the president. You absolutely do not have the authority to stop processing migrants altogether, he warned. Unbeknown to her, Ms. Nielsen's staff started work on her letter of resignation. The president has continued to face resistance in the courts and public outrage about his immigration agenda. But the people who tried to restrain him have largely been replaced. In the interview with The Times this past summer, the president said he had seriously considered sealing the border during March, but acknowledged that doing so would have been very severe. The problem you have with the laws the way they are, we can have 100,000 of our soldiers standing up there, they can't do a thing, Mr. Trump was reported to have said. According to Newsweek, the Trump administration has awarded 3 new contracts to build about 65 miles of new border wall across the Rio Grande Valley, the busiest sector for Border Patrol agents. According to a press release from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, the new border wall sections will be built across Starr, Hidalgo and Cameron counties in Texas. The border wall system will include an 18 to 30 foot tall steel bollard wall, all-weather roads, lighting, enforcement cameras, and other related technology to create a complete enforcement zone, the press release states. Construction of the new border wall sections is expected to begin in early 2020, according to Border Patrol, pending availability of real estate. Importantly, it will also be taking place in locations where no barriers currently exist, unlike the border wall sections that are currently being built to replace and fortify existing structures. According to a border wall status update shared with Newsweek, as of September 30th, Customs and Border Patrol has only seen 69 miles of its border wall built, with sections constructed in place of dilapidated and outdated designs. Despite the slow progress, the agency has maintained that by the end of 2020, it plans to have seen 450 miles of new border wall system built, in addition to having another 59 miles under construction in high-priority locations across the southwest border. That means that, as it stands, the border still likely has more than 350 miles of border wall left to build before the end of 2020. According to Customs and Border, its newly signed contracts will see a combined total value of $812,604,005 spent on the new border wall sections, with deals for construction within the Starr and Hidalgo counties awarded to Southern Border Constructors, while further construction in the Cameron and Hidalgo counties has been awarded to Gibraltar-Cadell joint venture. CBP said the projects are not part of President Donald Trump's emergency declaration and that no Pentagon funding will be used. According to the agency, the Rio Grande Valley sector is the nation's busiest, accounting for approximately 40% of apprehensions at the border. These projects will improve the RGV sector's ability to impede and deny illegal border crossings and the drug and human smuggling activities of transnational criminal organizations, the CBP said. President Donald Trump declared a state of emergency in February over the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border, which has seen a rise in the number of migrants trying to enter the country the past year. The emergency order has allowed Mr. Trump to divert money from other projects to fund his long-promised wall after he failed to get approval for the required cash from Congress. Lawmakers have voted twice to end the emergency, but have not yet achieved the two-thirds support needed. Before he took office, there were 654 miles of barrier along the southern border, made up of 354 miles of barriers to stop pedestrians and 300 miles of anti-vehicle fencing. In the run-up to his election victory, Mr. Trump promised to build a wall along the border's entire 2,000-mile length. He later clarified that it would only cover half of that, with nature, such as mountains and rivers, helping to take care of the rest. But, since Mr. Trump entered the White House, although some of the already existing barriers have been replaced, work on extending the current barrier only began this year. Overall, $9.8 billion has been secured since January 2017 to construct approximately 509 miles of new border wall system, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP. A total of 57 miles of replacement barrier and 9 miles of new secondary barrier have been constructed, a total of 66 miles. The money for the barrier has come from previous funding approved by Congress as well as extra cash Mr. Trump has been able to access since he declared a state of emergency. By the end of 2020, CBP says it expects to have completed 450 miles of new border wall system, which includes steel bollard barriers, all-weather roads, lighting, enforcement cameras and other technology, and to have started to build an additional 59 miles. Although a more sophisticated border with sensors, drones, and more border patrol guards will be needed, some suggest a better policy would be to enforce existing laws about hiring illegals and make the employers face real prison time with hefty fines that may bankrupt their businesses. Anyways, thanks for watching. Support this channel by subscribing, ringing the notification bell, thumbs up, and remember, peace through strength.